It's the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday presented by DraftKings, America's #1 rated sportsbook app. How about the Final Four this weekend? Ever heard of it? Kind of a big deal. Do yourself a favor. Take $1, go to the DraftKings Sportsbook, tell them Ross sent you, and you have a chance to win $100 enjoying Final Four basketball. We will later on this week with Greg Cosell have a Spread the Word winner at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. I think you guys know what to do there. All you have to do is engage on any of the platforms, and you get a chance to win a signed picture, press pass, football card, whatever you want. Sponsor confirmation email winner. Man, we got some awesome sponsors right now. We really, really do. Check them out on the sponsors page at rosstucker.com. Love me some cameo style shout outs. Love when you guys ask me and hire me to do a cameo for you for whatever reason. Love giving them out for free for those of you that subscribe and comment at youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. And I love getting to talk to my buddy Andrew Brandt every Wednesday. Not every Wednesday, actually. He's the host of the Business of Sports podcast. So we've been doing a little bit more like every other Wednesday in the offseason. So make sure you subscribe. Anyway, it's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Andrew, always great to talk with you. Always great to see you. I won't say your age, but you are the world's youngest, coolest looking guy for your age. At this point, when you do the triathlon stuff, you must be murdering the people in your age group.
Well, you said you wouldn't mention my age, but I moved up an age group this year, which is bad for optics in terms of that number, but good for optics in terms of my finishes in the age groups. Yeah, I mean, it's been a few years, Ross, but now it's like I've accepted not to look too hard at the overall standings and worry about losing to the 20 and 30-year-olds. So I look primarily at the older age groups. But listen, there's a theory I heard a few years ago called the look to your right, look to your left theory. So, and it's about never getting complacent. So you think you're good at something, look to your right, there's somebody better, right? At your age, older than you, whatever it is. So no, I'm not winning my age groups in the 50s or 60s, but I'm doing well. And I think it's all about, look to your right, look to your left. There's always someone better.
So I want to do something different today.
Yeah.
Of course, you can check out Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Brandt, and make sure you check out the Business of Sports podcast. It's awesome. We're getting advertisers for the Business of Sports podcast that don't want to advertise on my shows. They just like you, Andrew. So I don't know what you're doing over there, but you're doing it right. So I do know what you're doing. I listen to the show, but that's not my point. Anyway, I wanted to do something that I feel like you are uniquely qualified. So most people that listen to the show, watch the show on YouTube, they have some interest, that they have a huge interest in sports. And somewhere deep down, they either had or have an interest in working in sports. Well, so you've been on the agent side. You've been on the front office side. You're now on the media side. So you are uniquely qualified to answer these questions. And it's funny because I know this happens to you a lot. Andrew, it's at least twice a week that I get an email or a text or something from someone who I know tangentially in my life that their child wants to get a job in sports. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And they either want to be an agent or they want to get in the media or they want to work for a team or whatever. So you've done all those things. And I'm sure we even have listeners that their kids might want to work in sports. Yeah. So let's start with the agent business. What are the pros and cons of before we get into how you would get started, for someone that's even considering it, what would you say are the pros and cons of the agent business?
Let me just start it this way, Ross. I've had 3 chapters in my career. First chapter, agent, each a decade. Second chapter, team executive with the Packers. Third chapter, media and academia. And for reasons we can talk about another time, I do prefer this third chapter. And I think it's giving back. I listen, I learn. I am one that believes in giving back. I can't cure cancer. I can't solve diseases, but I can give back knowledge and perspective to listeners, to viewers, to students. So that's what this third chapter is all about. The agent side is a very different life than the team side. You don't go into an office and sit there for 8 hours. You don't depend a lot on the infrastructure of what your office is, and the marketing department and the finance department and the weight room and the trainers and the video guys and the equipment guys and the all for one atmosphere towards a team. As an agent, before we get into even how, you're really like a fantasy football player, right? You are, because your attention is on players on different teams, maximizing their income, maximizing their playing opportunities, period. You say to the team you care about them, you care about their cap, and you care about the rest of their team, but you really just care about your clients. So to think about being an agent, think about being a fantasy football player. You have sole focus on these players who may be on different teams. You're not about a team. If you have some fandom from growing up, that tends to fall away pretty quickly once you get into the business. So being an agent is a 24-hour job. You are working for high-profile people that just happen to be athletes. You're working hard. And I think here's the thing you need to know. You get paid on contract negotiations, whether it be team contract or endorsement contract, a fee that you work out. The team contract's governed by the NFLPA. You can only go up to 3%. The endorsement contracts is whatever you can agree to a player with. But what you do is 90% beyond negotiating the contracts. So what do you mean? Well, you help them get a place. You help them look at a lease. You help them work on a car, get a car. You help them, their family. You help them with travel. You help them get situated in their new city. You help them have training before the combine, after the combine. You help them look at business opportunities that may never develop. You spend days looking at possible websites people want them to invest in, things they want them to be involved with. And none of this is billable. So the first thing you have to know as an agent is the only billables are negotiating the contracts, but that is literally 10% of your job with players.
Such a good point, Andrew. And thinking about it now, I think about all the things that guys have their agents do that their agents don't get paid for. Yeah. It's really interesting because I remember hearing from a guy one time that said he talks to his agent once a week. Yeah. And I remember thinking, about what?
Why?
You know what I mean? Like, I don't have anything to say to my agent once a week. Like, I don't know what that conversation would even be. So
let me pick up on that real quick. I think it's a weaning, and I use that word. I know it's a strong word, but it's a weaning process, because in my agent career, early in their careers, out of college, year 1, year 2, a lot of contact. Years 3, and this is probably what you're thinking, years 3, 4, 5, and hopefully longer, it's more like, I'll get in touch with you when I need a contract, which from an agent perspective, business-wise, is really the way to work. To only hear from a guy every 3 years, like, hey, when are we getting started on this contract? Because you get bogged down in all the details of guys' lives. That's not good for business. It's good for relationship, but it's not good for business.
So if we're being realistic, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, trying to go at it on your own as an agent, like just start from scratch and be an agent and try to get a player, try to build a business, that sounds almost impossible and like a terrible idea to me. I guess you know better than I would tell someone if that's really what you want to do, try to knock down every door you can to meet with all the top agents and basically volunteer your time to do whatever they ask you to do until they eventually give you a job, and then you work your way up in their organization. Maybe at some point, years down the line, you break off on your own. But these guys that think they're going to go to law school and then be an agent and get players, I think they're, for the most part, kidding themselves.
Yeah, and I do admit over the years, I've been in this a while, I'm seeing probably less a percentage of young people saying, I want to be an agent. Usually, if I have a class of 50 and I ask who wants to be an agent, that, years ago, 40 hands would go up. Now I think it's really lower, and maybe it's because of these conversations that you and I have. It's tough. I was lucky. I got in eventually with David Falk, the super agent in basketball, an apprentice. It wasn't called that, but apprenticed for him for several years and basically just learned. Here's a question I asked to someone who wants to be an agent. And this is stark, and I know it's cold, but I'm like, okay, kid, I'm a player. Why should I sign with you? Why should I sign with you? And you can say, I got great grades, I got a great smile, I know people in training or whatever, but no. Why would a player sign with you? And once you can answer that question, and maybe it's, I was college roommates with a first-round pick. That's great. That's great. That's a reason. But if you don't have that, you're going to be in trouble. So I know, and then the question is, how do I get in with a big firm? And if there was an easy answer, everyone would do it. But you just have to find your way. And this is the advice I tell everyone about any job, is make yourself special. Make yourself different. Look at me. I'm at that age we talked about at the beginning of this segment, and I'm still working on making myself different, making that business sports podcast, like you said, the only one of its kind. So make yourself different if you're trying to be an agent.
What about, Andrew, on the front office side, and what is the difference? You kind of talked about the agent side, and there's not as much infrastructure and the hand holding. The team side's the opposite, right? It's kind of all for one for all.
Yeah, and very stable. Now, I know people talk about getting fired when coaches don't do well, but if you're front office, you're somewhat immune from that. You're really all about the team, and it really becomes a consuming life, not about your clients, not about being woken up at 3 a.m. with a client problem, but about your team. And you just said it, all for one for all. You try not to have your world rocked by a loss on Sunday for the next week, or your world elevated by a win on Sunday. You try to keep even keel. You can't respond like the media and fans do to your team. And that takes work to really stay on an even keel. But again, my job, every action had a reaction, managing a team salary cap. You sign a new player, you have to worry about what comes out on the other side. You have this wall in front of you all day long of your roster, when players' contracts are up, who their agents are, how much they make, how do they count against the cap. You're studying everyone else's team to figure out where they're going to go with their cap and contracts. It's a very consuming way of living, being with the team. I did it for a decade, and frankly, it was enough. But if you go work for a team, your time, it's kind of like working for a big firm on Wall Street. You are consumed by that team day in and day out. You're all about the results, and you live that way. Infrastructure's there, absolutely. Stability, absolutely. Going in office all hours, assuming no pandemic, absolutely. So different way of life.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Andrew. I find that side to be much more appealing than the agent side. And it's interesting because that's the one thing my wife sometimes, I don't want to say she recommends, but she kind of misses caring about who wins.
Yeah.
She kind of misses, that feeling of being with the other wives and being in the stands and sort of having a stake in the game.
I went to league meetings, and a conversation always struck me in the hallways between meetings, where colleagues of mine, front office guys, GMs, even ownership, you'd say, "How you doing?" And he'd say, "Well, we're 4-6." And I would always think, "No, how are you doing?" And that's the mentality. And you and the listeners and the viewers know me well enough that I had to get out of that. I'm a little more, let's put it bluntly, I'm a little more selfish. I got things to do. I got things to work on. I want to be myself and not subsumed by team results. So the few people that I was close with in the NFL, like I've had on the podcast several times, Thomas Dimitroff, who was GM of the Falcons for 13 years. He's a lot more than football. So these are the kind of things that go on in that world.
Yeah, it's got to be. What was it like when you were up in the stands? When you were up in the skybox watching the game?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I was with the scouts, sometimes with our GM Ted Thompson or Ron Wolf. These are home games. Away games were worse, but home games, we could obviously cheer, but it was business-like. I had to wear a suit to games, and I couldn't bring my kids. They were down there, but I couldn't sit with them. On the road was worse because you sit in a press box. We didn't have an owner. We didn't have an owner's box. And you can't cheer. And I learned that the hard way, Ross. First year, I'm cheering like mad, and people are looking at me like I did something wrong, and I did. So yeah, it's very sterile. That's the word. Sterile environment in those games.
Yeah, it really is. It's a good point.
Yeah.
What about on the media side now? Because that's one I can chime in on. And it's funny. I don't want to say I don't know what to say to people, Andrew, but when they want to get into broadcasting, I'm kind of blunt with them about the fact that a big reason why I have the jobs I have is because I played for a while.
Yeah.
And a big reason why you have the jobs you have, Andrew, is because you were an agent and you were an executive. Just starting out on the media side, it's really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you have more access points than you've ever had, right? With social media, with blogs, with podcasts, anyone can do it. There's no barriers to entry there. On the other hand, that's a downside, because any guy in his basement or woman in her basement can have a blog, can have a podcast. And what makes you different again? Here's the thing with me, Ross. Unlike you, I mean, do you even consider me, I ask this rhetorically, media? Because I've never covered a game and will never cover a game, ever. Have no interest in that. I have no interest in writing a who's good, who's bad column, on the field. I don't have the expertise for that. I have no interest in writing fantasy. I have no interest in writing odds. I have no interest in writing about, favorites to win the Super Bowl. But I provide insight. If Adam Schefter's breaking news, my job is to say, what does that mean? If someone's reporting on a game, I don't get in that. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe 10 years ago, there wasn't an opportunity in media for me. There wasn't, insight people. That's what I am. I'm an insight media. I have no reporting duties or interests. I'm never going to scoop. And 10, 20 years ago, that was media, right? That was media, game coverage and scoops. And so I'm thankful that's a part of it. So my advice is, I know no one has experience like me, but find your special sauce some way.
You are media, but it's a good point. You've kind of carved out a unique niche in media. You've carved out a unique niche in life. I mean, when you think about it, I guess that's the last question, Andrew, would just be, you do help with Vayner Sports now. What do you really do? Because you're writing the column for MMQB, you're hosting the Business of Sports podcast, You know all the stuff you do at Villanova Law. You've got the Sunday newsletter. So I guess I'm sure some of the listeners are just wondering, what do you do for Vayner Sports?
Over the years, I've had agencies get to me, and it's not a surprise. People ask me, I still talk, teams call, agents call. Over 10 years, maybe one or two teams have called, but a lot of agents have called. And they all want the same thing, Ross. Can we use your experience? Because we have, we're getting to players, but we can't close the deal because we don't have a lot of experience negotiating contracts. And I've turned down a lot of those. But I decided to work with Vayner because I saw something different. I saw maybe a disruption on the agent side, not just the standard, do your contract, get you a Nike deal. They're doing a lot with digital, obviously, with Gary Vee, and they're doing a lot with new media. And now they're into this whole world, which I don't know about, called NFTs. So I think there's some disruption there. I guess what I really do is try to be a mentor to some of the young agents. I do believe in giving back. One of my mentors in the business was Eugene Parker, the great agent. Eugene died suddenly a few years ago. And his son, Brandon Parker, brought me in. And I mentor Brandon, and he just completed a really strong deal for Leonard Williams with the Giants. So just kind of being a mentor. I'm not going to recruit. I'm not going to be in those weeds we talked about with players, but kind of an oversight role. And I still get inquiries from other agents. I get inquiries to do expert witness stuff about contracts. Kenny Golladay just signed. I had to turn down, being an expert witness in a case between agents about him. So those are things that come up all the time too.
Andrew, this was fun, man.
Yeah.
I feel like we got to do something like this every year or so, just sort of a deep dive into some of the different roles. I think people probably got a lot out of this. Really appreciate the time.
Always a pleasure, Ross. I'll do these more often. These are fun.
You know what else is fun? Our new show, Football Feedback. It is amazing. It's YouTube only. We're going to have another one soon. It's when you guys get to be on the show. Think about it. You get to be on the show. Football Feedback. Here's who I'm picking for next week's show. I am picking people that go to keeps.com/Ross or keeps.com/any of the other shows, Fantasy Feast, College Draft. You guys know how I feel about Keeps. I've been using it for a while. I need it. It's done a pretty good job for me. Look at my hair right now as I'm talking to you. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. So keeps.com/draft, keeps.com/anything that works in one of our shows, keeps.com/even money, keeps.com/feast, or to keep it simple for this show, keeps.com/Ross. It's really easy to do. You'll get your first month free. If you're not sure whether or not you should start taking Keeps, you should. And you'll be the first people eligible for the Football Feedback show for next week if you send me an email, ross@rosstucker.com, after you sign up for your first month of treatment free.
Tuck's Takes.
Well, it's official, Ross. The NFL has added an extra game to the regular season, which means we're going to have 17 per season and 3 preseason games.
Right. And obviously, Bri, we knew this was coming for a while. Essentially, as soon as they signed that last CBA a little over a year ago, this was inevitable. And by the way, once they go to 17 games, which they are now, the players get more of the revenue. There's a kicker when it goes up to 17 games that the players get over 48%. So this was all prepared for, planned for. Feels like 20 times over the last year they've said, we're going to be 17 games. We're going to be 17. This week just means it's essentially official. I will say a couple things. Number one, I am glad that they're keeping 3 preseason games. I think that's important. And I know last year we had a season without it, and most people don't care. I get that. But a couple things. Number one, you want to try to find out what these young guys have. For me as a former player, I want all of these young men to feel like they really got their opportunity. Hard to do that with just training camp.
This year, they should have a more full offseason. The offseason programs start April 19th, although there's still some debate, Brian, whether they'll have like on-field OTAs or whether it will be totally virtual again. But the net is these young guys this year are going to get much more of an opportunity than they got a year ago. I think those 3 preseason games are extremely helpful for them. I think we'll see even less starters in the preseason games. You might see, a few guys play a couple series of the second preseason game would be my guess. But I think it's really important. I mean, take those preseason games for what they are. I mean, they're for the young guys to show what they can do and try to make the team, and that's what they should be for. And then we'll have the 17 games. I think it's great. I know there are a lot of people that are concerned about it. Look, ultimately, it's a lot more money for the players. And for one more game, I truly believe the vast majority of the players, if you polled them, would say, hey, for one more game, you can make another $100,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is. Most guys would say yes. I know guys like Alvin Kamara and others say they're not interested. I get that. But the vast majority of the guys, they know how short their careers are. They know that they want to try to make as much money from their God-given ability during this time as they can. So I'm happy for those guys. I'm happy that's going to increase the revenue significantly. What's interesting, I guess, is they're still starting it a week after Labor Day. They don't ever want to have it Labor Day weekend because people travel so much. So the end of the regular season will be like January 9th. And then the Super Bowl will be Valentine's Day weekend. So everything gets pushed back a week in terms of the end of the regular season and the Super Bowl. And I think most of you probably already know this by now, but it's formulaic, right? So you're going to play the corresponding team in your division, from a different division, right? So like the Eagles, for example, they finished last in the NFC East. And this year, the NFC East will play the AFC East. So the Eagles will end up playing the New York Jets. I don't know how they determined whether it was a home. Oh, all the AFC teams are home this year, and then they flip it the next time or whatever. So it's all formulaic as usual. I'm excited about it, and I'm really excited that they kept 3 preseason games. I think 2 would have been too small. And I know people don't like it. Some people don't like it, but it was sort of inevitable, and I'm glad it came through.
Tuck's Takes.
Some other news includes a Giant signing D-tackle Danny Shelton, the Bills Stadium, now called Highmark Stadium. Colt Miller signs a big extension with the Raiders. Bruce Arians gets his Super Bowl championship tattoo. Chase Daniels signs with the Chargers. Gabe Jackson gets a new contract with the Seahawks. And Colt McCoy's with the Cardinals. Mike Daniels with the Bengals.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things there, Bri. I'll go right down the line. So Danny Shelton essentially signed by the Giants as security to try to fill the void left by Dalvin Tomlinson. Had to be painful for Dave Gettleman to let Dalvin Tomlinson, who's a very good, young, durable, tough, run-stuffing D-tackle, go. The Giants couldn't pay everybody, but those are the type of guys that Dave Gettleman loves. So instead it'll be Danny Shelton, who's not quite the player Tomlinson is, but can fill that role while they probably try to draft the next Dalvin Tomlinson if they can. As for the Bills Stadium now being Highmark Stadium, I got to ask you, Brian, do you feel like these naming rights companies get the value out of it? Like it was just New Era Field for a couple of years. Although, flip side, for the years it was New Era Field, people said New Era a lot. People are like, what are New Era? Oh, New Era is the hat company, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, but you know what? When they say that, they're saying that on national TV in front of millions and millions of people. Every time it's in the newspaper, it's millions, of people who are getting it. So I don't know. Obviously, it has to have the value. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep spending the money for it. But at initial glance, yeah, I can see why you'd say that. But I think it's got to be. And at a certain price point, it's worth it.
Yeah, and the point you make, I think, is good there is that it's not an advertisement. It's not like when you're listening to the radio and they go to commercial, it's in the content. it'd be like I'm just talking to you, Brian. I say DraftKings, or remember back in the day. Oh, this is back at the Four Letter Network. I used to say State Farm, State Farm, State Farm, State Farm, State Farm, State Farm. It's it's Highmark Stadium here for the Bills. You almost it doesn't feel like an ad, but you're still hearing it. As for Colton Miller, wow, the Raiders, they are undergoing one of the most unique O-line makeovers I've seen. Colton Miller was not good as a rookie, got much better the last 2 years. Kudos to him for improving. There's a lesson there. Kudos to the Raiders for staying patient with their first round pick, and he got rewarded. It is interesting, though, that like on the same day, Gabe Jackson, who the Raiders traded to Seattle, got big money from the Seahawks. I don't really know why the Seahawks felt compelled to do that. I probably would have waited to see how Gabe Jackson played this year. My guess is that there's a element of salary cap relief, and that's why they did it. But I probably would have waited to see what Big Gabe could do this year before I gave him that big money. Because think about this. I mean, the Raiders, they were happy to get rid of Trent Brown, Gabe Jackson, Rodney Hudson, and a lot of NFL teams were happy to scoop those guys up. I mean, the Patriots are still paying Trent Brown a lot. The Seahawks are obviously paying Gabe Jackson a lot. The Cardinals traded a third-round pick for Rodney Hudson. So the Raiders, got rid of some really good offensive linemen, but they're keeping guys like Colton Miller. Arians getting a tattoo is amazing. I mean, that's just Arians. I love everything about that because he'd worked a long time to get to that point. Chase Daniel, I mean, kings stay kings. He just keeps going. It's unbelievable. I think it's another $1.5 million guaranteed. That guy, you want to talk about a guy that's made a lot of money playing professional football without actually getting hit very often. Chase Daniel's got to be way high on that list. If we're talking non-kickers and punters, Chase Daniel might be the number one guy in terms of money per contact, money per time they actually got hit in their football career. As for Colt McCoy with the Cardinals, makes sense that they want to have a veteran guy there, Texas guy. I get it. Mike Daniels back with the Bengals. Mike Daniels can still wreak some havoc in the interior D-line when he's healthy. The only other thing I would mention, Brian, that I thought was interesting is Roger Goodell saying that there will be full stadiums this fall. It makes sense to me. I don't know how they'll do it, but you'd have to think, Brian, at a minimum, they'd be able to just have the whole stadium be fully vaccinated people by then. We still, what is it? March 31st or is it? No, March 31st. Yeah. So we still have 4 months, whatever it is. By then you'll be able to get 60,000 fully vaccinated people in there if you want. Right.
I agree. I mean, right now, all the states are, not all of them, most of the states are opening up to anyone over 16 is now eligible. So hopefully by that point, everybody will be eligible and we can put this behind us.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Ever wanted to ask an NFL player a question? Well, here's your chance. It's time to Ask Ross.
The email address, ross@rosstucker.com. Love your emails. What do you got, Brian?
2 questions today, Ross, from Zach. Question number 1, there's been a lot made out of Eric Bieniemy as a head coaching candidate over the last few years and for many different reasons. Obviously, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have a lot of influence on how the Chiefs' offense is run, but what do you think is the most revealing quality of Bieniemy in becoming a head coach? Then question number 2, my fiance and I just went for our taste testing for our wedding venue. We decided on 3 different options for entrees. And since you are the press box food guru, I have to ask you, which would you choose out of these 3 dinner options? Number 1, bacon wrapped filet with crumbled blue cheese. B, crab cake topped with aioli. Or 3, a glazed pork chop. All of them served over a couple of asparagus branches and mashed potatoes. That is from our good friend, Zach. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, Zach is a tuckhead. Patreon.com/RT Media. Love it, Zach. Wow. So first of all, Bieniemy, I would say how well and how glowingly people speak of him is probably the defining quality for him so far. It's hard to know when you watch him play, right, how much of the offense, how much of that is Bieniemy. But when you hear him speak, he's impressive. And everybody talks about how good of a leader and mentor he is. So I think the most revealing thing about him as a head coach is just how well people speak of him. And the fact that Andy Reid gave him that job in the first place, I think says a lot. As for your entrees, wow, Zach, that's a tough one. Those are all good, man. Really good. So I love bacon wrap filet. I'm not a crumbled blue cheese guy. So if they would let me for the wedding say hold the crumbled blue cheese, I'd go bacon wrap filet, I think. However, I can't take the chance that that thing is totally loaded up with crumbled blue cheese. Just can't do it. Changes the flavor, changes the dynamic. So I would go with the crab cake topped with aioli. That sounds delicious. Glazed pork chop sounds good, but that seems like something you can get more often. For a wedding, if I've got those options, man, I would go bacon wrap filet if no blue cheese. But if there's blue cheese on it, I'll go crab cake top with aioli. Jeez, Zach, I haven't even had breakfast yet. I do like the intermittent fasting thing. You're killing me, bro. Killing me. Shout outs are in order. Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, Vision Comics with an X. I think we're done here.
Thanks for listening to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Fantasy Feast, Even Money, Business of Sports, and College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.